Imagine waking up in the morning to find that your life savings, enough yesterday to buy a house, can now barely afford a loaf of bread, that your monthly salary is worthless by the time you receive it, that people are carrying cash in wheelbarrows, not wallets. That's not a dystopian fantasy. That's hyperinflation. And it's happened more times than most people realize. We think of money as something stable, something we can count on, but history says otherwise. And the worst hyperinflations didn't just destroy bank accounts. They destroyed governments, families, empires. They burned through societies like financial wildfires, exposing just how fragile our systems really are. You're about to see exactly how five countries, five real economies, watch their currencies collapse into ash and what it cost them. And as you listen, remember inflation isn't always loud at first. It creeps in, it whispers, and by the time most people notice, it's too late to run. Let's start in Germany, 1923, the Weimar Republic. After World War I, Germany was crushed by debt. The Treaty of Versailles had slapped the country with over 132 billion gold marks in reparations, an amount so staggering it would have taken generations to repay. So, what did the German government do? It printed money. Lots of it. At first, it seemed manageable. Then prices doubled, then tripled, then exploded. By November 1923, the German mark was virtually worthless. A loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. People burned cash for warmth because it was cheaper than firewood. Children played with bricks of currency in the street. Middle-class families watched lifetimes of savings evaporate in weeks. And here's the deeper damage. It wasn't just money that collapsed. It was trust. Once society loses faith in its currency, everything breaks. Commerce, contracts, savings, salaries, all of it disintegrates. This financial collapse helped pave the way for social collapse. It created the desperation and chaos that gave extremists their opening. Just a decade later, Adolf Hitler seized power, and that economic trauma was part of the foundation. Fast forward to Zimbabwe, early 2000s. President Robert Mugabe's government, facing sanctions and economic isolation, launched massive land seizures that wrecked agricultural productivity. The government responded with, you guessed it, the printing press. And once again, the spiral began. By 2008, Zimbabwe's inflation rate was estimated at 79.6 billion% a month. Prices doubled every 24 hours. The government kept adding zeros to the currency, 10 million, 100 billion, even $100 trillion bills. Eventually, they just gave up and abandoned the Zimbabwean dollar entirely, switching to foreign currencies like the US dollar and South African rand. And what did it cost? Not just numbers on paper. Hyperinflation wiped out pensions, collapsed industries, and created a generation of economic refugees. Real wealth, land, skills, hard assets was the only thing that survived that let's go back in time again. Hungary, 1946. This one is still regarded as the worst hyperinflation in recorded history. After World War II, Hungary was economically shattered. The government started printing the pengo at an insane rate to cover war debts and reconstruction costs. At its peak, prices were doubling every 15 hours. The monthly inflation rate hit 41.9 quadrillion%. That's a 4 followed by 16 zeros. The currency became so worthless that the government introduced ever larger denominations. Then you had pengo, mopengo, and bilpengo, until finally, in August 1946, they abandoned the pengo completely and introduced a brand new currency, the forint. What did they lose? Everything. Hungary's middle class was annihilated. Savings accounts were reduced to zero, and the government lost any remaining legitimacy. Hyperinflation didn't just reset the economy. It erased the past. Next, let's turn to Latin America. Venezuela. From the 2010s to the present day. Oil-rich, resource-rich, yet politically broken. Years of corruption, price controls, nationalizations, and reckless monetary policy turned one of the region's wealthiest countries into a cautionary tale. The government printed money to cover massive deficits, subsidized failing programs, and maintain political control. And again, inflation took off. By 2018, Venezuela's annual inflation rate, crossed 1 million%. Imagine earning your paycheck and having to spend it the same day before it lost half its value. Supermarkets were empty, barter returned. Doctors and engineers fled the country to work as delivery drivers abroad. And just like in Zimbabwe, the government kept issuing new bills with more and more zeros until they finally slashed 6 zeros off the currency overnight in 2021. But you can't slash away the damage. Hyperinflation gutted Venezuela's economy, shredded its healthcare system, and turned millions of citizens into migrants. Once again, those with physical assets or access to dollars survived. Those without didn't. And now we arrive at a more obscure case, Yugoslavia in the 1990s. After the breakup of the Soviet bloc and the violent disintegration of the country itself, Yugoslavia's economy collapsed under the weight of war, international sanctions, and catastrophic mismanagement. In 1993 to 1994, inflation reached 313 million% per month. Prices doubled every 1.4 days. To try to stabilize things, the government introduced new currencies again and again, each time wiping out whatever savings people still had left. Citizens used German marks and U.S. dollars on the side just to survive. The official currency became a joke, useful only for lighting cigarettes or wallpapering abandoned shops. And underneath it all, the pattern repeats that a government faces crisis. It prints money. Trust evaporates. Currency collapses. Society fractures. Over and over again. Different countries, different decades, same mistake. You might be thinking, well, that's history. We're smarter now. We've learned. But have we? Today, global debt levels are at record highs. The United States alone carries over $36 trillion in national debt, and it's still growing. Central banks around the world have spent the last 15 years printing trillions to prop up economies, suppress interest rates, and stimulate markets. And for a while, it seemed to work. Inflation stayed tame. Growth continued. The system held until it didn't. In 2021 and 2022, something changed. After years of near-zero inflation, prices began rising fast. Supply chain shocks, the war in Ukraine, energy spikes, and yes, trillions in freshly printed money finally caught up. Suddenly, central banks went from printing to panicking. Interest rates were hiked aggressively, markets wobbled, and everyday people, the ones who never benefited from the cheap money boom, began to feel the squeeze. Rents surged, food prices climbed, wages didn't keep up, and for the first time in decades, people started asking the hard questions again. What is money? Who really controls it? What happens when the trust finally breaks? We're not in hyperinflation territory yet, but the warning signs are flashing, not just in prices, but in mindset, in the dangerous belief that printing money can solve structural problems, that we can borrow forever without consequences, that central banks will always bail us out. These are the exact same assumptions made in Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Hungary, Venezuela, and Yugoslavia. The difference now is scale. Never before has the entire global economy been this interconnected, this debt-driven, and this dependent on central bank intervention. If trust breaks today, it won't be confined to one country. It could be systemic. And that brings us to you. You might not control the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank, but you do control your own exposure, your savings, your habits, and your mindset as, what can you learn from the 5 worst hyperinflations in history? First, real wealth is not paper. It's purchasing power. It's land, skills, hard assets, useful networks, and internal resilience. In every single one of these nations, printed wealth vanished overnight, but those who owned tangible assets or could produce real value outside the financial system endured. Second, trust is everything. Currencies don't collapse because the ink fades. They collapse because belief does. Once people stop believing the money in their hand has value, the game is over, and that belief can evaporate faster than anyone imagines. Third, inflation punishes the unprepared. It moves fast, it compounds, and it hits hardest those living paycheck to paycheck. Governments can inflate away their debts, but you can't inflate your grocery bill down. That's why financial education isn't just about growing wealth. It's about protecting it. Protection today means understanding the system instead of blindly trusting it. It means reducing unnecessary debt. It means diversifying not just across stocks, but across entire systems. Hard assets, skills that are always in demand, relationships, and a lifestyle that costs less to sustain. Most of all, it means remembering that inflation is a hidden tax, a slow or sometimes sudden theft of your financial freedom, unless you know how to guard against it. The 5 worst hyperinflations in history weren't random events. They were caused by bad policy, war, denial, arrogance, and the seductive lie that money can be created without limit or consequence. But now you know better. You've seen the pattern. And the next time someone says that could never happen here, you'll know exactly how to respond. History doesn't repeat itself, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. Now, if this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.